ChatTalent.
This is ChatTalent number 4. How do we learn to trust machines?
Right, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know we'll have an international flavour to our audience today, as usual. So wherever you may be in the world, welcome. Hopefully you can all hear me loud and clear. You can see the screen share in front of you, and the technology is working as designed and as it should. This means a quick intro for those of you that are attending this for the first time, or these series for the first time. I'm Alan Walker. I'm your host for today. If you know me at all, you'll know me as the noisy chap on LinkedIn, the guy with the beard, and the guy who never shuts up on LinkedIn, you're probably thinking. But I'm also hugely interested in the future of work and how current and future leading edge technology intersects with the growing need for more human interaction and fairness in my mind. And I'm also hugely interested in today's topic, in particular how we learn to trust machines. And I've got with me today Boris Altemeyer from Cognisess. He's their Chief Science Officer. And Cognisess are a people analytics company, and who are doing some really seriously cool stuff in this space, in my opinion. And Boris is going to talk to us today about some of the myths and misconceptions of AI and machine learning, and hopefully put to bed many concerns that people have about these technologies. And hopefully by the end of the session, you'll have enough information to go away and talk to your colleagues, your friends, your family, and either prepare them for a dystopian future where we're ruled by our robot overlords, or more hopefully, more positively, tell them this type of technology will lead to, as humans, making better, more objective and quicker decisions based on far richer information. And ultimately, it will help us have more rather than less quality time with each other in both a professional and personal context. So I know I'm going to have lots of questions once Boris has done his thing. If you have as well, can I encourage you to put those questions in via the Q&A button that you should see. It'll either be at the top of your screen or at the bottom, rather than via the chat. The chat questions get lost in, but if they're in the Q&A, I can manage them quite nicely and make sure we get through as many of those as possible. We will be wrapping up bang on time. That's my promise to you busy folk. If there are any questions we don't get time to answer, we'll follow up with the people who ask them after the event. So without any further ado, I love that word, let's crack on. Dr. Boris, over to you.
Thank you, Alan. Well, thank you very much for having me on here. Really appreciate it. I have to say, well, I hope it's not such a bleak future. We had to call our analytics framework Deep Learn after all because Skynet was already taken, but well, there we go. Wonderful. Can everybody see my screen? Alan, is that fine?
It is, Boris. Yep, absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you. Lovely. So welcome everyone to a round on, well, how do we learn to trust machines, and basically what AI and machine learning is all the good things is hopefully going to do for us in the new recruitment era. I'll quickly go over some few things initially. So just to give you a very brief background. So the company I work for is called Cognisess. We're a predictive people analytics company, and basically we're interested in democratizing human capital. We want to find out what makes people great at what they do, and thereby find out all the interesting aspects that let us predict performance and let us predict in which situation certain people work best and how we can maximize what we get out of that. We've got our own platform, and that platform is all based around what we call Deep Learn. Deep Learn is our analytics framework, And I'll refer to that a few times during this session. So whenever I say deep learn, most of the time I just refer to our specific analytics platform for machine learning and AI. So it's all online based, and we are interested in finding objective data that we can work with, getting away from just basing everything on reputation. As a quick start, I won't assume that everyone who's on the session knows a lot about machine learning or AI, so I'm just going to set the scene briefly about that. For those of you who are already experts in the area, I'll have to get that out of the way initially. Whenever I refer here to machine learning and AI, the whole idea is basically using this key phrase in the same way as it's used in industry at the moment. I know it's a bit of a philosophical and maybe an academic question as to, is the current AI the real AI? Are we closer to sentience, and how sentient does an AI have to be to actually go there? I mean, overall, that basically just means, if we're having that discussion, that Microsoft switching off Tape, the AI that went a bit rogue online, could be considered murder. So I'm just going to leave that aside. Brilliant. Alan, that all okay so far?
Perfect, Boris. Yeah, you flow, and we'll do questions towards the end if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect.
Wonderful.
Brilliant. So the aspect of machine learning and AI that I'm going to refer to here is basically mainly pulling together data, and it's talking about so much data that normally a single individual would probably not be able to handle that anymore. So we're looking at workforce data, performance data, any productivity metrics you've got, demographics, strategy data, anything that a business can provide, and anything that normally sits very comfortably somewhere in a drawer and is never touched, but has been printed out at some point. Apart from that, we've also got the feedback and the survey and appraisal, so a 360 approach really, because ultimately, and I'm going to touch base on that later on, machine learning lives off the feedback it gets in the same way that you would tell a human recruiter, I liked or I didn't like the candidate you showed me. And you might already have seen here assessments and games. So what is all that about? The information that we get from people on our platform is mostly based around games and gamified assessments, because in that way, we don't have the social desirability. We get objective metrics of performance, of cognitive ability, emotional ability, different skills and expertise and behavior without anyone fake gooding, if you like. So that's basically what I'm going to refer to. So what is it all about trusting machines? Now, from my research, I've been in the very awkward position of asking several hundred people, mostly in person, do you think Facebook is benevolent? Now, you get a few strange looks about that, but normally people are able to say yes or no. So why is that? Facebook, for example, is a little bit personified. It comes across in the same way that we would assess a person, because we're dealing with faces, we're dealing with people, they're showing and sharing emotions, we see stories and skills, all the bits that we normally see in other humans. And it's all about these shared experiences and the conversations. So the tool itself becomes completely transparent or translucent. We don't really see the tool anymore. It's only the content that we see. Now, if I asked you, is big data benevolent? Is analytics benevolent? That will probably not really work. It's a bit like asking you, is your TV remote benevolent? Does it have your best interests at heart? It's a bit of an odd question. But why would big data not be? Because ultimately, all the data that we're talking about with analytics and machine learning refers back to the same things. It's all about emotions, people, faces, and experiences. It's only that it's not coded to be ingested by humans. It's just there for the machine's benefit to find the patterns that human might not be able to see. So in terms of trusting machines or trusting what we get out of machine interaction, the distinction that has been made in research, and I think it really helps to be aware of, is the following. So when we deal with people, we normally have the interhuman trust. So when you trust someone, you basically normally base that, consciously or unconsciously, on, are they good at what they do? Are they normally stable? So if I ask them a question today and tomorrow, is the response going to be similar? And are they benevolent? Would they take into consideration my feelings and interests when they make a decision? If all that is true, you'll probably trust them. When we deal with machines, it's a bit difficult because we can't say my microwave is competent, has integrity, and is benevolent. And for analytics, it's even more abstract because for most people, it's just numbers. Human machine trust works a bit differently. It's all about, is it functional? So does it do what it says on the tin? Is it reliable? So does it work every time in a predictable fashion? And is it helpful? So does it make operation easy? And can I find my way around it quite easily? Now that leads us to the first myth. Machine learning is biased. From our work with machine learning and artificial intelligence and predictive analytics, I can assure you that is actually really not true, because the computer code is only ever as biased as you make it from the outset, which is why with our work, for example, whilst we collect, it's true, we collect gender information and age, but none of the analytics algorithms actually has access to the data. So as far as the predictive analytics is concerned, it doesn't know the age of the person. It doesn't know the gender. It doesn't know the ethnicity. It doesn't know the sexual orientation. It doesn't know anything about them because we don't believe that is important. So if I don't actually give the computer access to that information to learn about it, it is technically as if it didn't exist. Okay, we could now say, but isn't that in the distribution of the data sets? On the one hand, thinking about the statistics, we have got large data sets, and large data sets always tend to normalize themselves. But if we're all honest about it, no one has a perfectly normally distributed data set, but given the analytics and how robust they are, normal-ish is fine, because normal-ish already leads to no bias based on the distribution. And especially with predictive analytics and machine learning, we're not talking about a sample of 10 people. We're talking 100, 1,000, 10,000, tens of thousands. And at that point, so if we, for example, take the number of assessments that people have played on our platform, which is in the millions, at that point, the bias would completely go away. In fact, I would actually say, having met quite a few people in business, that some machine learning algorithms are far, far less biased than people. That is for the following. So overall, machines, in my opinion, and the machine learning algorithms will be fairer than an interviewer, because the data that comes into the machine learning to pull together and find patterns in will be always collected with the same accuracy and never with bias. It always has the exact same parameters. And as long as the data that comes through is objective, as we, for example, try to do in terms of our performance assessments, there won't be any bias attached to it. So it's not people rating themselves on something, it's a true assessment of skill. There is no bias in the analytics because the machine learning or machine algorithms and the AI, they don't have concepts in terms of value judgments as we would have. They just go by what's in the data and what is the best predictor in a very complex way for whatever we want to predict. Now, this is one of my favorites. Purely, machine learning has got more data available. And I think that's the key cracking point. And that's where, for me, I'm a bit of a stats geek, but that's where, for me, the trust really comes in. On our platform, if we only look at a selection of assessments, we can already generate 29 Megayacht of combinations. So 29 Megayacht would be, well, unfortunately, at a number with 24 zeros, we kind of run out of denominators. So a number with 24 zeros is a yotta, and we've got a Megayacht because we've got 26 zeros. It's a 29 followed by 26 zeros of combinations. Very few people would be able to describe someone with that kind of clarity and accuracy. So that allows us also to compare candidates, not only on more combinations, but compare it with more candidates and people that a single recruiter might meet in their lifetime. So currently, for example, when just referring back to our deep learning data sets, we're dealing with around about 40,000 data sets or 40,000 profiles. So in there, that's a number of people in the different areas of expertise in different industries that far exceeds the number of people any recruiter will have met and actually had a meaningful conversation with. And if we go back to the standard approach of let's have an interview about something, let's just meet in person and see what happens. So human to human, that is. Any human normally makes the initial decision about whether they like or dislike someone in approximately 7 seconds. So if we are a bit benevolent here, let's say it's about 10 seconds, but after 10 seconds, you've made up your mind as to whether you would really enjoy having a further conversation with the person or not. And that will also impact whether you trust the person or not, because you will have made up your mind as to whether they're competent, whether they have integrity, and maybe even whether they're benevolent and think about what you want to get out of this. Benefit of AI, for example, if we look only at facial expression recognition, computer vision, which creates a lot of data, we are looking at 20 facial or over 20 facial landmarks 30 times a second for as long as the encounter lasts. So if you wanted to film someone for half an hour, well, you do the maths. That's quite a lot of data, and every frame is processed in the same way that the others have been processed. So it doesn't actually just switch off after 7 or 10 seconds to say, let's just save the rest of the time because we're no longer interested. It doesn't do that. It always stays at the same parameter. Now, in terms of all that data and all these numbers and the large data sets, I think another myth that quite often comes up is AI is an all or nothing approach, isn't it? So either I'm in a company that has the size and capacity, potentially even in-house capacity, to make everything machine learning, everything AI, and absolutely everything will be run on these frameworks, or I don't do it at all. But that's not true, because it all depends on how you actually apply it. There are quick wins that you can get with machine learning, and there are very good long-term strategies you can follow. But as with all quick wins, also the machine learning quick wins, they have a best before date because, well, we are in fast-changing times, and the benefit of machine learning is that it can change quickly as well. It can adapt to new information very quickly. So in terms of quick wins, if you wanted to rely either on your own or someone else's data set with machine learning for your own parameters, is you can reduce bias very quickly because you take the human element out. It adds a completely new level of transparency to the recruitment because suddenly it's all about the data. You could theoretically go through an entire hiring process, a restructuring process, or a performance appraisal process without actually knowing who exactly has been hired or who exactly has been appraised, because you've never actually seen them in person. So in terms of bias and transparency, that can be fed back to the candidates as well. That's a completely new level. Plus, we've got direct learning from the performance metrics. So if we think about the analytics platform not as a static thing, it's not an analysis that you run once a month, once a year, and then you act on it. A bit like a lot of companies still do their strategy plans. It's something that runs continuously. It's continuously sitting there thinking about the data that's coming through. And if there is a change in the data, if there is a U-turn in the performance data, it will act on it, in that the predictions will change immediately. The requirements will change immediately. So if the person you hired turns out not to be suitable for the new circumstance anymore, you will have learned from that. In terms of long-term goals, you can actually ingest what I would call a company's DNA, the entire work organization culture, as a profiler in the AI or the machine learning. So that allows you to actually find people who, well, we call it social cohesion, who from their personality just slot in perfectly, and who from their skill set, cognitive ability, general behavior, all the complex things that make up people's performance, just slot in there where they boost the team and the team boosts them. Cognitive diversity is something that we also look into very much, in that if you only create carbon copies, you're never going to get the benefit of the full breadth of human performance and the cognitive diversity you just get in terms of people seeing the world differently, making sense of the world in a different way. And last but definitely not least, the favorite with some of our clients, it's churn prediction. Machine learning does actually allow you to find aspects hidden in the data, certain patterns that are common and lead to churn. So you will eventually be in a position to predict who is likely to leave in the next preset time window, say 3 months, 6 months, depending on industry or sector. Now, at that point, you can decide, do you actually want to do something about it, or do you want to hire differently? Now, this is one of my favorite expressions for that. Machine learning is quite often, unfortunately, used as a bit of tactical sorcery, because a lot of people use it as a buzzword. They don't know what it does. They don't know what the outcomes necessarily mean or how they can be implemented in terms of actionable insights. So it's something, a bit of sorcery. It's a bit of witchcraft. It's something we do that does something miraculous, that is quite sparkly and nice, but we do it in a tactical way because we only do it for one problem right now. We solve that and then we move on, which unfortunately doesn't always lead to the best results. It will solve the problem, but most likely the cause of the problem won't go away. And that is where the art of the long view comes in, which in fact is also a very good book I can recommend, but it's all about a long-term game because short-sighted analytics doesn't really go together. It's all about planning ahead and using the long-term patterns you see to plan out long-term and position the structure of the whole organization. That also embeds the feedback loops, or very much relies on the feedback loops, because the thing we really need, the thing we really need is the feedback for the AI to actually see what's going on, what's actually coming up there. And yeah, overall, that gives us the strategic advantages that are just coming out through the machine learning that in terms of short-sighted analytics you wouldn't get. Another myth, machine learning takes our decision autonomy away. I would definitely argue no, in that even if the machine learning algorithm, even if a profiler that we could build on our platform has screened 10,000 applicants for you, and it recommends, say, 10 who are ideally suited from what the machine learning or from the machine learned profiler knows to your requirements, you can still make the choice and hire none of them. You could still say, actually, I don't think they are what I want. You can go completely against it. However, you can, with all the information, base your decisions on a very, very rich background of data that normally would not have been prepared in that way. Now, exactly as I said earlier, exactly as human recruiters do, machines learn from what best looks like. And machine learning also learns from mistakes. I'm not saying that it never makes mistakes, because there are ultimately only so many things you can model. So we can't model reality because that would be a little bit too complex. So sometimes circumstances might change or something might not have been taken into consideration. But as soon as you provide the AI with the feedback that that's actually not what I wanted, it will take that into account for the next time. So the next round, the same person wouldn't be suggested for the same job. Now, in terms of human being in charge of the parameters, it's all pretty much similar as if you outsourced everything, including setting of parameters, to someone else. So if you would trust a good recruiter, there's no reason why you shouldn't trust a good recruiter who knows about machine learning and uses that, because ultimately it's just more information. Well, in terms of enriching the picture, just to give you another benchmark there, and people say, oh, actually, it's not that much data, or it doesn't give so much benefit, and I know what good looks like and I know what to look for. in one of the research projects we did based on our analysis framework, we worked with race drivers in race simulators. So we pulled in all the data we could about them in terms of cognitive ability, behavior, personality, brain waves, speed, accelerometers, whatever you like. And that meant that per driver, we create 3 million data points in under 10 minutes. And all those are completely put back into the analysis, and they are, if you like, remembered. And yeah, I mean, if there's anyone in the audience who can do that as well, please get in touch, because that is just an amount of information that actually you couldn't put it in an Excel spreadsheet anymore because, well, I tried it for fun. It just tilts out. So if you ever wanted to know whether an Excel spreadsheet actually has an endpoint, yes, it does. And it's far before this data is actually dealt with. So that's actually too much for a human to normally deal with in a meaningful way. That's actually one of the race drivers you see there, wearing an EEG headband that we use to get the brain data. You can see some of the output on the screens there. You can also see one of the objective assessments, cognitive assessments that we use to basically get to the base of, to the root of where the decisions are made, which is ultimately the brain. And yeah, in terms of humans having experience in terms of recruitment and organizational decision making, AI has data, and in the same way that we trust our experiences, AI will trust the data. So it's all about the data quality that actually goes in. Another myth, machine learning creates carbon copies. Also, not really, because if that were true, that would make all the individual characteristics of cognitive diversity and the mapping based on cognitive diversity moot point. Variance and variety can be learned into machine learning aspects, and shared characteristics doesn't necessarily mean that it's just an average that is taken. It's normally a very complex multi-level model that is being built that is partially recursive in itself, so updates itself. And ultimately, human recruiters would also look for shared characteristics. So again, that is something we would normally trust in. In terms of strategic recruitment, that just means if we're not looking for a quick fix, but actually implement machine learning in the way that it's intended to, as a long-standing backbone in terms of data crunching and decision-making support, carbon copies just become very, very improbable. Our final myth for today would be AI will not change HR in a way that is actually true, because it already has. And given that I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to these things, I would just say, trust me on that one. Alan, do we have questions? Or
we have lots of questions, and I'm going to be greedy and ask them first, actually. So, Boris, you might. I'm looking at this. I'm hearing the power of Cognisess as one example of a AI machine learning powered assessment tool. But how does it compare to something like, I don't know, Myers-Briggs or an SHL or something like that?
I think there I'll go back to the Megayachters in the way that I think Myers-Briggs it's in a way it's horses for courses. Myers-Briggs is a fantastic tool for what it does. So if everyone in a room has done it, and you can walk into the room and say, I'm an ENTJ, and everyone knows what that means, that's fantastic. But ultimately, it, in a way, pigeonholes you into one of 16 categories. Now, if you've got the granularity of 16 categories, that's great for team building in a room. If you've got the granularity of something in the Megayachters, if you really want a long-standing granularity in prediction, I think that's where it sets it apart.
Excellent. And have you made up the word Megayachter? I've got to ask that question.
I have to say, we actually have, but with help of one of our mathematicians, because when we had a look at it, it came out as that's actually a lot of combinations. Can we shorten that? Okay, what's the highest nomination? Yotta. Well, we're still left with zeros. What do we do now? We'll just have a mega. So.
Brilliant. And I've got two more questions, and then I'm going to start asking some from the audience. So audience, start popping your questions into the Q&A. There's two in there already. My other two questions. So lots of companies still do assessment centres, and I used to do them for a career for 8 or 9 years and did hundreds over that time, and always felt that we were collecting lots of information through those assessment centres, whether it's interviews or group exercises or business simulations or whatever it might be. Whenever we pulled that together, we thought we had a pretty broad picture of an individual from lots of different angles and lots of different assessors. What do you feel machine learning adds to that?
I think it could add to that in two different ways, or two separate ways. On the one hand, undoubtedly, there's a lot of data coming out of that, and most of the time, if it's done properly, it will be good data. Now, if we use that data in a standard spreadsheet and assume that test A or exercise A predicts outcome B in a linear way, I don't think we're going to get very far. So in terms of the spreadsheets I've seen over time for assessment center results, those correlations actually don't exist in that way. It's mostly a bit more complex than that. So if someone wanted to rely on assessment centers, absolutely fine. But then I think still the data should be ingested in a way that actually allows for the complex modeling behind it, because the behavior that comes out of the assessment center, that's not linear, that's rather complex. And in a second aspect, we have actually done that with a few clients, and in one particular case, one of our clients was looking for a large case study that people normally do, and that adds another day to the assessment center. Now, that is very costly, and it takes a lot of time. We've taken the data that came out of previous cohorts from the assessment center, have machine learned it, mapped it onto games on our platform, and then rather than having people do a business simulation for 6 hours in a very nice conference hotel that costs a lot of money to do, we got them to play assessments on our platform for 20 minutes, and we predicted the outcome. So in terms of money-saving opportunity and time-saving opportunity, I think that's a good start.
It's kind of a no-brainer, isn't it? So just going back to that then. So in terms of the assessments, again, a lot of people are used to assessment centres. They're a day long, sometimes 2 days long if it's for a senior hire or even longer. To get the amount of rich data that we're looking at being able to pull out and into the world of Megayacht and 3 million data points in 10 minutes, etc., are we asking candidates to go through hours and hours of game playing and gamified assessments?
Whilst, if I take our platform as an example there, we've got 47 active assessment at the moment. By next week, we're having 49, I think. I would actually not recommend anyone does them in one go, because that will tire you out. That's really not the intention. For most jobs, we've seen from the data that we've got, so we can offer that regardless of whether a company actually has the data themselves or whether they rely on our data sets. We would just say, you're looking for someone for this particular job, or to replace someone, or to promote someone, succession planning for this particular route. Okay, these are the 5, 6, 10 key aspects that we're looking at. So we build a profiler, we build the games out, they play them for about 20 minutes, and that's it. Well, normally that gives us more than enough information to predict very accurately.
Excellent, excellent. Right, let's move on to some audience questions now. We've got 10 minutes, and we will be stopping bang on 3:45. So first question, and I absolutely love this one, and it's a shame the person has asked it anonymously, because I'd give them a gold star. They say it's a fascinating topic. How were you interviewed, Boris, and when you were hired for Cognisess? Were you interviewed? And if you were, was it by a machine, by a human, or a combination of both?
I'd like to add a Cognisess gold star for that. That is very good. Now, I have to say, everyone actually who joins us, and I wasn't an exception there, everyone who joins us goes through our assessments as well. But ultimately, I was invited to meet the team as well. So for me, it was a combination of our own assessments and just meeting the team. But in a way, I might have been a bit lucky there, because our video or computer vision, video analysis, speech analysis, natural language processing, that's actually something that has only come about since I've been here. So maybe I got off lightly there.
Yeah, and I guess things have moved on since you joined as well, in terms of the rigor and depth and breadth of those assessments as well. I've got a question here from Pete Jones. Pete says, great presentation, firstly. And where do you see the technology living and being placed? Is it purely in the realm of a HR department, or do you see it being used by external intermediaries, whether it's recruitment agencies, recruitment firms, consultants, etc.? Who typically would be using it?
That is actually a very good question. I think at the moment, if we just look at the moment, it's probably more about distributing the knowledge about it, and in a way having the trust and the confidence in it. So at the moment, unfortunately, it's mainly specialist externals, I would say, who look into that. That being said, we've got quite a few corporate clients, enterprise clients, where we're looking at tens of thousands of employees across the globe and more. If they've got their own analytics divisions, they are using machine learning for other aspects already. The interesting thing for me is always to see that if an organization uses machine learning and predictive analytics for their distribution network, why don't they use it for their people? And I think, in a way, that's where the direction is going to go. Do you have the assessments? Do you have the metrics? And if you do, then there's no reason why it couldn't sit either in the organization or externally. I hope that kind of answers the question.
It does, yeah. That's great, thank you. Really good question again here from James Batchelor. Thanks for this, James. James says he recruits management consultants, and their success once they're in role is often based on relationships with clients, which isn't always tangible. How can an AI / machine learning help in that recruitment process? Is it really going to supersede that gut feeling that hiring managers have?
Again, yeah, very good question. Thank you for that. I would see it potentially really adding in two separate areas. So on the one hand, as long as there's any information at all that can be used, and that could be even frequency of phone calls, frequency of emails, anything like that, or anything from a 360 or any client satisfaction surveys, you can learn that in and build patterns out of that, or build profiles based on the patterns. Plus, in terms of the computer vision that we're using at the moment and the landmarking for that, the attributes that we give out are about expressiveness and positivity. And we found very, very high inter-rater correlations and reliability in terms of the machine rating, how engaging and expressive someone is, and how positive their delivery is, and how the same video is perceived by humans. So in a way, apart from that being easily scalable, so you don't have to have an interview with everyone, you just have to ask them for a good video. I think that could potentially really add to that, because not everyone, I'm not saying that doesn't apply to, or that applies to recruiters, but not everyone is a good judge of someone's face.
Absolutely. And also, from my understanding, the other way around of looking at it is to take a selection of successful management consultants and put them through the platform, so you can learn more about them. So what are their common traits? What are their common cognitive abilities, etc., their common skills, and the platform can start to learn from that as well. Is that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's normally exactly the way I would, or we would generally recommend it. If you've got a variety of successful people and top performers, as well maybe as people who you thought should be very good, but it didn't work out for some reason. If you get the data, then we can build the pattern around it.
Excellent. And just a couple more questions, and this is from somebody anonymous. So if they could reach out to me after the event, I can add some more flavour to the answer that Boris is going to give here for you, because we've been using Cognisess a little bit in our business as well. The first question is, can you Boris give a real example of where your platform has added value to an organisation that you particularly are really proud of? Sounds like a competency-based interview.
I'm gonna be cheeky there and give one quick one and then a proper one. I think the one that I found very fascinating personally was our work with the race drivers, figuring out actually what makes elite drivers really fast and really consistent, based on lots and lots of data. So for me, that was fascinating to see. And I think that really adds value in terms of the career of the individuals we're actually coaching. And that for me is quite something. I think the particular project I would say I'm really proud of in terms of what the team has delivered is our work with Intercontinental Hotels that I'm allowed to openly share because it actually made it into the Financial Times, which is why I'm particularly proud of that. Where we help them with their future leaders who are the fast track candidates for management. So from basically entry in the hospitality industry to managers of large hotels, 5-star category, and help them decide who the next candidate is going to be. It's very prestigious. It's very competitive environment, and they just need to get it right. And everyone we interacted with there, which included assessment centers and modeling for assessment centers as well, the candidates really enjoyed it. They really enjoyed the gamified aspect, and the recruitment team found it was just much easier because suddenly you don't have to sift through 700 applications. It's all in a system, and the machine has already gone through the initially addressing the questions. What's the level of English? What's the parameters in terms of, are they very positive? Are they expressive? Are they quick thinking? What's their personality? Do they match? And it's all there. So actually, when it comes to interviews, you start from a completely different point. So I would say in terms of what the team delivered there, that's what I'm proudest of.
And I guess it also pulls out some perhaps diamonds in the rough who might not fit the traditional mold of what good looks like to a human from a distance, maybe, but actually when you start to get into the skin of them, maybe given the right opportunity, given the stage to actually perform, and given the opportunity to grow, that person can potentially come alive and be a real future star.
Exactly, couldn't agree more, because to me it's not purely about just assessing strength, because strength for me is something that's in a way linear but also static. You're strong in something, but what I'm interested in is predicting potential. So exactly as you said, find someone who normally might not have made it into the final round, and actually see where they can really shine.
Perfect. Now, being very mindful of time, there were 2 questions left over, and we're not going to get a chance to cover them now. So whoever the anonymous attendee who asked about who do you work with at the moment and where do the assessments fit in the recruitment process, drop me a line after the webinar closes, and I'll come back to you and hook you up with the right people to answer those questions. So just really quickly, everybody, thank you again for spending some time to come and attend ChatTalent and ChatTalent number 4. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much, Boris, for sharing your knowledge and wisdom and insight into the world of machine learning and AI. It's been really appreciated. And just as a bit of forward marketing, our next event is on the 16th of October, if I remember correctly, and it's going to be with a guy called Adam Gordon, who is the founder of an organization called Candidate ID, and he's going to be talking about how to create a pipeline of talent which tells you in real time whether that pipeline is cold, warm, or or hire ready. So very recruitment focused this time round. But yep, again, thanks everybody. Look forward to seeing you all in a couple of weeks' time, and have an awesome day. And thank you very much. Cheers. Take care.
Thank you.